The kaiju genre is a lot like professional wrestling. People either really love it, or they just don't like it. And that's kind of why things like Godzilla are a tough sell to mainstream American audiences. And the 90s weren't of any particular help in that regard, either. So naturally, myself included, a lot of people were excited when the studio, Legendary Pictures, the same studio that brought us Pacific Rim, announced that they were going to be tackling an adaptation of Godzilla. So naturally, everyone was excited. It's like, hey, it's being made from a place of passion. However, coming out of the film, I have the feeling that Godzilla may trip over its own tail as soon as he attempts to climb the box office. You'll have to forgive me for sounding a bit weird. I am currently battling a pretty nasty cold that's pretty much came up out of nowhere. So let's start by talking about the things that I liked about the film. The first thing that I liked is that this version of Godzilla is a lot more faithful to the version that we see in the films produced by Toho. You can definitely tell that there was a genuine passion, a genuine love for Godzilla that was being put into this film. And the other thing that I liked about it is that from a technical aspect, visually it looks good. Like, it looks really good. Granted, there were some problems I had with the visuals in terms of whether or not it needed to be in 3D, but let's save that for later in the video. So yeah, I liked how faithful it was to the Toho films, and visually it just looks amazing, but there's a great deal of things that I didn't particularly like about this film. Firstly, the film posed a bit of a fast one in terms of who our main character is supposed to be. I mean, the trailers make us think that it's going to be Bryan Cranston playing the main character. But that isn't the case, unfortunately. And it's even kind of annoying how they do kind of the whole false protagonist thing, where they kind of build up and establish this character's motivations, only to literally have the character written out partway through the beginning of the film. And really, it was kind of disappointing, because between Bryan Cranston and Aaron Taylor Johnson, Bryan Cranston would have been the actor that I would have wanted to follow throughout the story, because Aaron Taylor Johnson's character doesn't really have all that much to him. I mean, there's nothing for audiences to really latch onto. There's no character to really carry us through the story. Even Ken Watanabe's character, Dr. Serizawa, just kind of has this perpetual expression of bewilderment on his face. And so really, there's no one character we can really latch on that really helps pull us through the story. Another issue I took is kind of, I know a lot of people may think, oh, but this was what made it good, but introducing the additional monsters in the film. I think they got a little bit too cocky of like, hey, we created the Mutos to have Godzilla fight. And firstly, they look like a mix between the kaijus from Pacific Rim and the monster from Cloverfield. And secondly, they took up a lot more screen time than the Big G himself. And even with kind of the crowded screen time between the monsters themselves kind of took a bit of a backseat. I mean, I understand you're trying to kind of show how humanity would react to that sort of crisis, but it's kind of the case it wanted to either focus all on the monsters or focus all on that, and it just couldn't find a nice balance. Speaking of balance, when it comes to the depiction of Godzilla himself, they kind of tried to have the best of both worlds of both Godzilla as the hero and defender of the earth, and Godzilla as the massive force of destruction that could pretty much wipe out an entire city. They tried to find a way to kind of combine the two of, oh, he's a giant force of destruction, but he's on our side, and it just didn't work. They really needed to pick one aspect of Godzilla and really develop it. I mean, yeah, looks good, but as a character, it's like they couldn't quite decide what they wanted to do with Godzilla. Another issue I take with the film is that it almost tried to kind of force the allegorical aspects of the characters onto the audience. I mean, with the original 1954 film, yes, Godzilla's an allegory for nuclear destruction, but that was more of a subtle thing. They didn't openly call to it too much. I mean, yeah, at the beginning of the 1954 film, they explained how the various radiation nuclear experiments and the nuclear bombs awoke this dinosaur and mutated it. But that was pretty much as far as they went. They didn't basically go, oh yeah, this is like Hiroshima and stuff, because I guess with Japanese audiences, they already knew about that and they didn't need to be reminded any more than they needed to for the sake of understanding the story. Whereas this film kind of tries to force the Hiroshima and Nagasaki allegory a little too strongly. I mean, the whole scene with the pocket watch that belonged to Ken Watanabe's character's father, it just felt kind of forced and unnecessary. I mean, I understand, yeah, they're all about nuclear destruction, all about the monsters that feed on radiation, but I understand the whole, this is like all about nuclear war stuff. It just needed to be a little bit more subtle. All in all, this film feels like it was more focused on spectacle than it was on telling a story. And I've got nothing wrong with like huge spectacle films, but the thing is, they've done a much better spectacle film before, Pacific Rim. The thing is with Pacific Rim, yeah, it has like the giant robots battling monsters, but they also give us characters that we're able to follow through the story. Whereas with Godzilla, they try to have us latch on to Aaron Taylor Johnson's character. I mean, that's not a knock against him as an actor, it's just more the case of the way it was written. Just didn't work, especially when they kind of have the opening scenes make us think that Bryan Cranston's going to be the main character. And so really, the story needed work. It looks good, it's a good popcorn movie, but the story is just kind of weak. There's not much to it. To summarize, this film is more focused on spectacle than it is story, as we're not given any major characters to latch onto, especially given how the trailers and even the opening scenes of the film make us think we're going to have a character to latch onto, only to have said character written out of the story. And while it looks good, the visuals don't really work well with 3D because it felt like they didn't really shoot it with 3D in mind. And so if you get the chance to see this in an IMAX theater in 2D, I highly recommend it. But save yourself the 3D surcharge if you get the chance and just see this film in 2D. And really, it pretty much is what it is. It's a giant monster movie, monsters fighting each other. It's kind of mostly flash, not enough substance. Kind of like a less interesting version of Pacific Rim, because Pacific Rim had the characters we could latch onto, whereas this film does not. And it also just fails to strike that nice balance between the monster battles, the actions of the military, or even Godzilla as the hero and Godzilla as the monster. So really, to kind of use a scale that my dad came up with on the K-Talk radio show, the SP Romney show, don't pay more than $8 to see this film. That's the best way I can describe it. Don't pay more than $8. Save yourself the 3D surcharge. And yeah, it may mean not seeing it in IMAX, but visually looks good, but not worth seeing in 3D or going like all out to see it. That said, I give Godzilla a 3 out of 5. So that's it for this episode of Romney's Reviews. I don't know what's on deck for the next episode because I'm kind of in an interesting point, as you may have seen in my Future of Romney's Reviews video. But if you want to hear more of me while I kind of deal with this nasty cold that I picked up, then you can check me out over on the Geek News Reviews and Opinions podcast, where I work with Adam Mickelson and Aldo Gomez, and we talk about basically entertainment news, technology news, stuff like that. So yeah, all I could say is I'll see you next time.